Hello and welcome to the Practice Marketing Podcast, highlighting successful strategies from North America's fastest growing clinics and experts so you can learn from their wins and power your practice growth. Hi, I'm your host, Neil Trickett, CEO of Practice Promotions, and today's focus, we're going to talk about building a seven-figure practice with Darryl Yardley here. And Darryl is amazing. I've known him for a long time, good friend. And he's a physiotherapist, a business leader, and the chief operating officer of Clinic Accelerator, where he supports over 400 clinic owners across North America. Over the past decade, Darryl has mentored hundreds of physios and chiros. He's helped them grow from new grads to star clinicians, clinic directors, and even partners. And he's hired hundreds of clinicians, built his own seven-figure practice, and taught business and practice management at 4 Canadian universities, including Queen's and Western, where he's now professor of business and leadership in physical therapy. And Darryl's superpower is turning complex clinic challenges into real growth strategies without the fluff. So Darryl, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I appreciate you actually giving me the big invite here. I am super pumped. Thanks.
Well, you're worth it.
Yeah. Thanks for the intro.
Yeah. So I'm sure that as the chief operating officer of Clinic Accelerator, you get to coach a lot of physiotherapists, business owners. So I'm curious for you, what really gets you fired up?
Yeah, I think it's sort of is seeing the wins that people have, right? So, on the Clinic Accelerator side, we tend to see practice owners just like us, right? Totally stuck in the weeds, putting out fires, can't see the light at the end of the tunnel type of thing. Then as you start working with them and things start to click, all of a sudden it's 1 win, 2 wins, 3 wins. And next thing you know, their clinic is totally on growth scale strategy as opposed to, dumpster fire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get it. It's the same reason that I do what I do. And I think that's the biggest thing that I love seeing is just people grow, right? People win, have opportunities they didn't think that were possible. And I've been around the Clinic Accelerator group for a long time and seen the amazing work that you do to help lift up clinicians, give them guidance, give them the clear path. And they just, wow, just seeing the results that they get is really cool. So I'm curious for you, do you have a passion for someone who you like to work with? Is there a particular group or type of people?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, and me, I'm kind of the clinical guy of our group, right? So, anytime that I can still hop in and have a clinical debate and turn that clinical debate into business growth and strategy is kind of my wheelhouse, right? So, and for me too, as a clinician at times, there's like 10 excuses I could always come up with of why I wouldn't do something if I put my PT hat on, right? But if you put your business hat on, you got to figure out how to make clinical and business collide with, patient first philosophy, right? So I actually really, really like working with that clinician or that practice owner that's working 60 hours a week and still 55 of those are clinical, and slowly helping them kind of pare back clinical practice to find time to work on the business, not just in the business. But it's a bit of a control challenge for a lot of us, right? And if you think about even going back into, your days before starting here, as a PT, like that's our identity. That's my comfort zone. That's what I'm good at. That's what I spent years developing, to get really, really good at what I do. And now I'm in a world of like stuff that I don't really like to do. But it's necessary because the business world hit me in the ass, right? So that's the group I really like because you can see such great progress, but it's hard and you need to have that kind of humble discussion with them too to be like, listen, I've been there. I know what you're doing. Here's how I messed it up over the last decade. Here's how I'd suggest that try not to make that same mistake, but you will make mistakes, but those are growth opportunities. And that's the group that I really like to work with. And especially the groups too, where we've got a lot of those clinicians that don't have really good buy-in because this is a business coaching program. Business is one component of it. The second part is, what do you do to grow your practice? You got to be really good at managing patients first and foremost.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the key to a lot of stuff, right? If you can deliver an amazing outcome, amazing products, and that's one of the conundrums, right, of small business is that you go into small business because you want to do it better than where you used to work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
and like I can do it better, right? I want to have more time with my patients. So you get into it for that philosophy, but then you soon realize there's a lot more to it than just treating
Yeah.
patients, right?
Yeah.
And then in order to go beyond that kind of solopreneur model, you have to learn the skills of business. You have to, but then how do you deliver the care and the outcomes that you want more on scale, right? And that's different systems and processes for the clinical side of it, right? The scalability of it.
And even as you see some of these, practice owners grow, right? Having one or two clinicians and, an admin, maybe a 1.5 FT, that's not too bad, right? To keep that as a solid unit. But then as that clinic grows and you start ingesting different personalities in there, your whole leadership focus will have to change too. And probably one of the biggest wins that I had recently is I was working with two practice owners, and I had one of their clinicians in our kind of our private practice boot camp. And he never had anything bad to say about the practice owners, but I knew he always really struggled on challenging him to do things differently, be a little bit more assertive with, how he managed patients from start to finish. Ended up moving to a different province. Next, he's calling me to say, Darryl, I need help because now I've opened my own practice. And the highlight for me was those practice owners that I had that were pushing me a little bit harder, man, they had it dialed in. Because now on the other side of the coin, he's like, holy shit, like this is harder than I thought. And what they were asking wasn't about business. It was about how to really create a better experience so people knew what this business was about versus the other 5 healthcare businesses within a stone's throw away.
Yeah, totally see that.
Yeah.
I've been there. I remember when I had that moment in my practice, the guy I worked for before, I was like, oh yeah, he actually had it. He was doing pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of like when you get the right person too, like they'll eat that humble pie too, and they'll actually, I told this guy, I'm like, the only thing I need you to do after today, besides like everything I told you to do, is call your previous practice owners. Like, you guys still got along. You have to tell them though, like, you guys are doing a great job. That's all I need you to do. And he didn't actually. They texted me to be like, what did you say to that guy? I'm like, nothing. He just realized that it's not that easy to run in practice.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. And so is there anything that, as you've coached hundreds of different physios and physical therapists, is there anything that you find frustrates you, like that one common mistake that keeps happening?
Yeah. Like, it especially, sorry, you were kind of thinking too more like on the PT side of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the fact that what I would say too is, and it's consistent in Canada and the US, right? We don't really sell our expertise, right? And what I find is, especially, really up here in Canada, we don't have, that 12 weeks of approved funding, right? On the, dealing with certain insurance carriers, like really a lot of our practice is cash pay, right? So if you're not demonstrating value early, they're not going to return, right? But the challenge that I find with a lot of individuals is, and this is sort of where I think the business quality of care debate happens, and it becomes a real barrier / objection to working for a particular, organization. But I actually think we're really good at managing people early. And I don't know necessarily if it's across the board, if it's like, lack of experience, lack of confidence, lack of mentorship and coaching potentially. But whenever you and I have a conversation to say, well, these types of patients and these types of conditions in outpatient MSK, we have so much data. These patients should come to our clinic 12, 14 times, but yours is only coming 4. And it becomes this like, well, they ran out of funding, or, well, they were better. And it's like, yeah, but we have a continuum that we should be putting patients through from a recovery journey perspective. So they're starting with us, we calm things down, we put out that fire, whatever they're coming in with, but where do we rebuild things, right? Calm stuff down, build it back up. And then how do we keep them there? Or quite honestly, maybe even exceed expectations to help people realize, like, based on my expertise and my skill set, I can actually help you do more. But let me tell you why we're going to get there. And hey, guess what, Neil? Do you even want to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. But I think what really frustrates me, though, is it becomes a business argument as opposed to, why did our patients not finish their plan of care? Neil needed to go back to X activity with his grandkids But all I have written in your chart is that the patient actually had less pain, 60% improvement. Where's the objective eval? Where's the functional test? Where's the validation that this gentleman went through a full course of care with an expert, which we would call ourselves PTs? We're seeing that. And that's my biggest frustration, because it's not just about how busy is my practice. It's like, how will the people respect what it is that we do in primary care?
Yeah. And the beautiful thing with that is that if you approach it that way, and
Mm-hmm.
that's going to help you get amazing outcomes, it makes it so much easier to grow your practice, because now you have incredible word of mouth, right? And people are getting amazing outcomes. They stay with you a lot longer, so that obviously that's going to help you with patient visits and revenue, but it's from a point of getting them to where they want to be eventually, right? And so many, like the number one thing that people really shoot for is they just want to be healthier, right? Like people aspire to be healthier. And so our model tends to be, you have an injury, let's get you in, we'll get you to a certain level, and then you go figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
Right. And like you said, we need to be on that continuum. And we're in that pivot point now in our industry. And I've always said this, that I think Canada has been ahead of the curve because of the need to be more cash based than here in the US. But we're at a point now in the US where more and more clinics are really bringing in cash models because they have to, right?
Yeah.
The insurance just is not there anymore. So the clinics that will be successful are the ones that bring in that hybrid cash model, and they increase the ability to help patients go beyond just the scope of basic care, if you will, right?
Yeah. And I think what I like to where you're going on that too is like the challenge will always become too with, some of the, clinicians that we'll work with, right? We kind of see them through a bit of their lifespan, right? Like they'll come in and, they'll really be that younger clinician. They really struggle, like, oh, you told me I should see this patient 8 times, but now they'll tell us now that they're clinic directors and they've been through that journey. They're like, yeah, but I didn't actually know what to do in those 8 minutes. So I was like, so you underdosed and undertreated because you didn't have the confidence, but why wouldn't you have reached out? Like, and I know this one kid in particular, like his owner is like one of the smartest guys that I know in Canada, right? Like, but it's sort of interesting, right? So you almost have to, as a practice owner, or, if you're coaching your team, or if you've got a clinic direct, like you've got to help them already kind of expect that based on what, the data is telling you, right? I think the other thing too is a really good test that I think we should always think about as practice owners is when I'm in that clinic, if you just did a quick survey or had your admins do it to say, Neil, before you leave the clinic, hey, why are you coming back next week? Guarantee you have no idea. Now, does the clinician know? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But most, right? But I know in my head where I want to take you. But if you have no idea, why would I go from what was covered under insurance to all of a sudden I now have to pay out of pocket? I don't know what's changing. So what would I pay for? I'm already happy. I'm happy with my 60% improvement, but is $90 to $200 a session, is it worth paying out of pocket for? That's the question we have to ask ourselves.
Yeah, and that's traditionally been the weakest area in physio, right? In PT has been the ability to sell yourself, right? We really don't get that kind of training in school. It comes more from, hey, here's your evaluation, here's our plan of care, but there's more to it. And what was interesting, when I had practice, the business coach that I was with, they actually sold us a course that was sales training for our PTs. So they actually had a person come out to our clinic, and they actually it was like a 2-day thing, and worked our therapist through this training course basically on sales. But it was from the perspective of doing the right thing for your patient, right? And it was just really fascinating to see the improvement in people keeping their plan of cares, going beyond that, some more cash pay. But you're right in that you have to train your therapist to be able to tell that story to your patients. Like, here's where you are, and here's where you want to go, and here's the steps that it's going to take for us to get there. I don't know, like, your insurance is going to cover everything here, but in order for us to get there, this is what we need to do. And I think too, like, as we start to evolve in practice, we can take lessons from other industries. So I think one thing that's really fascinating, this is good for probably larger practices, is if we look at the plastic surgery model, right? When you go for plastic surgery consultations, you you see the doctor, right? He does his thing, but then you don't stay with the doctor for that financial component. You go to the person who, like the advisor or something, or the care coordinator, right? And your care coordinator is really the person that is the salesperson, right? They're sales trained. They're like, hey, Doctor so and so recommends this, 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 and this is what it's going to be. We'll map it all out for you. Here's our plans. Make it financially affordable. So it takes the financial part of it off of the clinician, and it's held by a sales action. And I think that's really a positive thing for a larger type clinic. At a smaller business, you got to train your therapist to kind of have more of that conversation.
Yeah. And, you think about it too, it's kind of similar in the car industry too, right? Like once you choose like, hey, this is the vehicle I want, then you go up to like finance or whatever it is, right? But one of the things that I think is what's so interesting too, especially being in, the university system and then now watching the gaps, right, that exist. But when we think about where private practice is going, when you think about today, like we even just kind of highlighted a couple of things like, hey, this is what I'm sort of anticipating. This is what I would predict. This is what it's going to take to get there. The reality is that we weren't trained to deal with what's the repercussions if Neil, you don't do that and have that. So I'm not kind of placing blame on you, but letting if we do it this way, this could be an outcome. If we do it that way, this could be an outcome. Sometimes that has to be kind of a conversation around the negative too. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side of that, we know we're going to face barriers, right? Time is a barrier. Motivation's a barrier. Finances are a barrier. I don't recall one program course ever that taught me how to actually have a conversation with a patient to give them alternative options, right? So all of a sudden, the only default I have is just come less than, mm-hmm. right? Or, let's just see how you do on your own. Why would you do that, right? Without any follow-up. So it's really interesting, but if I was to really kind of hone in on a practice owner right now, and you wanted to dial up your clinic and really focus on mentorship, deal with those barriers and objections. Because I think a therapist is pretty good at saying, this is how I can help you. Mm-hmm. But we weren't ever given the resources to know what to do when someone says no. And trust me, the reason we're all PTs is we don't like sales. So if someone told me to do outbound sales calls, as soon as I get my first no, I'm done. Mm-hmm. Right? Like it's gonna negatively affect me emotionally, right? So I hate rejection, but teach me how to deal with rejection because it's normal.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to sell those outcomes, right? And you're totally right. And we often don't paint the other side of the outcome, right? Like, hey, if we don't really handle this fully, I usually would say like, hey, here's the deal, right? We're gonna have this certain expectation. You're gonna start to feel better, but you're still gonna have weakness, poor coordination in your joints, and that sets you up for future injury. And so I don't want to see you back here in 6 months' time with the same problem again. Like let's get this fully handled and moving forward, So like those kind of conversations we need to train our team to be able to have.
That's right.
Awesome. And so Darryl, I'm curious because this is something that you teach in Clinic Accelerator, but you've opened and designed dozens of floor plans for clinics as well as startups to optimize that patient experience with getting the most revenue per square footage. So I'm curious, can you tell me kind of how that looks? What's some of the secrets to floor planning?
Yeah. So I think, for me, the most important part is how much of that space, as you said, can I make a revenue generating, right? But then also bearing in mind that, if you take away all your storage and your staff rooms and all that stuff, your clinic will just be a huge mess, right? So for us, it's really about designing really good, patient flow as well. When you think about it, like, can I, as a therapist, can I see sight lines everywhere? And can patients see all the different components too that I have in my practice? So don't tuck away your gym, make sure it's actually visible. But I would say too, and I know visiting to a lot of practices in the US, it's still a little bit more aligned with the model that we would recommend, but it really needs to be a hybrid. So like, I think truly the secret to all of it to be revenue generating and room for growth, you can have your private rooms as needed, but you gotta have an open treatment space still where beds, and again, it's you choose, do you use curtains? Do you keep it open? What can you do there? But I can make so much more happen. And even on the mentorship side, if I really want to get clinicians rocking and rolling, I want them to hear what I say when I'm treating side by side. And I know there's, some people will say there was a big movement for us out West. Everything went private room. I don't know why, right? Yeah. And then you look still at a regular sports clinic and the whole thing's open. Mm-hmm. So for me, the secret to is how do you create a hybrid so you can really create an interdisciplinary model. And one of the other things that we've used too is we try to get people away from like, this is my room, this is your room, right? So how do we make these rooms, basically I can turn over a room really, really quickly, right? How can I make sure that a room is available if I do need a private space, right? And then really think about too, your strategy is if you do need some private space, like let's say you're doing pelvic health or you've got massage therapy happening in there, can you make them a little bit out to the side so, I'm not clanging squat rack at the same point in time. But people also can know that that's what's actually going on back there. So I get that patient that says, hey, what's going on in those back rooms? Well, we also offer these particular services as well. And the other thing that we've started to see too, and I think a lot of people have had some really, really good success with it, is when you are designing that gym space, make it stand out a little bit more, right? So we see a lot more people now putting turf into their clinics, and people now know that, hey, that's the gym on that side, right?
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot more equipment though, but think about it, like I always say to people, design it like a small little like apartment, right? Where, we don't need huge equipment, make sure things can fold, your squat rack folds into the wall, right? You don't need a huge pulley system anymore. You can buy a little like anchor unit too, right? So I think it's really about thinking about that. The other big thing that I would say that I've messed up multiple times too, designing clinics, is you try to keep everything to like sections, right? Like this is my gym area. Then you got 4 people in a gym because you got 5 clinicians working. No one can work. So it's really thinking about how do you think about workflow. So you've got a shoulder patient at the top, maybe in the gym, but they're not, you don't have the second shoulder patient waiting for the pulleys to become available. So really think about designing that space when you have a full team, not just when you're designing your new space and you only have 1 clinician.
That's great advice. And have you seen, I'm curious there, have you seen practice owners that, approach it from how can I do a minimalist thing here because of cost of build out or whatever it may be there, right? And like maybe the impact of that later on?
Yeah. We've seen that for sure, especially on this side of like, I know I have built a clinic that's going to have 8 treatment tables, and I only got 3 to start. It actually looks like the clinic's not designed properly, right? I really do like the minimalist approach so you can really maximize space, right? And I think too is, you can pretty much design a clinic a lot cheaper than it used to be, right? Because I don't need Biodex machines anymore like we did in the past, right? There's lots of other strategies. I think another thing that needs to get built into a lot of clinics now is where do we do our objective testing, right? So how do we justify to patients that there's more for us to work on? But again, we used to talk about bells and whistles, right? We knew if we had an IFC machine, I think there was a study on it, you had good conduction, lights would go on and patients would respond positively to it. But that's a bit hocus pocus stuff versus now, what do our clinics look like? Do we have a TV that shows someone who's on a force plate with objective testing? So the next patient is like, can I do that? Can you show me where I need to go? Right. So I think there's an opportunity to is use a minimalist approach at times, still build out your practice so people look like it's a complete practice, but maybe put things on wish lists, right? So if I needed to save money, maybe I'm going to hold off before I buy my shockwave unit. It's going to be 30 grand. And I needed 6 months to kind of build up some cash flow, but I wouldn't waste time and resources when I'm trying to get a really good experience for people coming through the door.
The top 10% of PT owners aren't just surviving, they're thriving. But what's their secret? Well, Neil Trickett's new Market to Grow book reveals how the top 10% of PT practices leverage marketing systems to simultaneously grow their new patients, attract top talent, and boost profit in their practice. You can learn from their secrets. Visit practicepromotions.net/book to claim your free copy of Market to Grow. Yes, you heard that right. We are shipping a free copy of Market to Grow to all podcast listeners who want it. Just visit practicepromotions.net/book to claim your free book. And now back to the show.
It makes sense, like, if you have that plan of like what I want to add, but I see it from a marketing perspective also, right? So from a marketing perspective, what I've seen is that those clinics that have the equipment, right? So the lasers or the M-Wave or what, shock therapy, shockwave, shock therapy, shockwave therapy. if you have some of those tools, perception in the patient's mind is that this is something I can't do at home, right? I'm going to pay for this service because this laser, this shockwave therapy, like, is helping me out. And then, if you have certain exercise equipment, things that they may not have at home. So I think there is a certain investment that you need to make ongoing in the practice to kind of level up, especially if you want to start building more cash pay, programs in your practice. People will pay for something that they see as technology or valuable to them, in addition to your knowledge, right? So if it's just bare bones, like a plinth, there's a certain value that you can do from your knowledge, but like if you can have more of that experience of someone coming there. And I really love what you said there, like plan the openness of the gym too, and that might be something you have to consider. Like, hey, I have to put a little bit more into this build out here to make it the way that I see it happening in 2 or 3 years time.
Yeah.
Because if you have all those small rooms, like it's also part of the patient experience. And I know, like, when we moved we built a new location in our practice that was just a straight, like, from concrete, right? So
Yeah.
that gave you a lot of flexibility to build it the way that we wanted, and having a really large open gym was so awesome because people saw each other having success and wins. It keeps them, like, motivated to keep coming. They say, hey, I didn't know you also treated necks. My husband has a neck problem. Come on, yeah, come on in. Let me take a look at him. So there's all those opportunities you can create with thinking it from a patient experience standpoint.
Yeah. And I think too, on that, like, I've been challenged on like, I totally agree with you, Neil, on that one, right? And then someone will challenge me and they say, well, we have lots of patients that, maybe want to be a little bit more private and don't want to be in that environment, right? But I think that's the thing too, that a lot of us from a practice owner perspective is, well, who's your ideal client, right? Like, I can't be everything to everybody, but I have to think about what's the best utility for my space. And quite honestly, we see lots of patients that need a private session. They just go into our private room. But I'll be honest, 90% of the patients that walk through my door, they're talking to the patient beside too. And I'm like, it is what it is, right? And I think there's a lot of social proof for a lot of people as well. It's like, you know what? I came in and I was really, like, down and out with my knee, but I'm watching that guy literally run on the treadmill now, and they have a conversation, right? That's
Totally.
great.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that hybrid, having enough private rooms where you can, have privacy for people that you need to work with, but then, creating the flows, the gym experience, everything there is really, really key.
And I think that's the last thing though on that one though, Neil, just for everybody as a little tip, is just be really, really, structured with how you use those private rooms, right? Especially if it's a matter of using different disciplines, right? So if all of a sudden you've got one provider that sees 8 patients all day, but you and I are going to see 16 all day, right? Then you have to make sure that you've got those rooms in shifts, right? Or you're really structured through your EMR of, certain patients that will hold into that room, because otherwise you've got a room that's not really generating you any revenue. And that becomes a huge problem. Or you've got another provider that can't access the room, and then they get really upset with us as the practice owners. So really think about shifting out your rooms, an AM shift and a PM shift, right? So you can get full utility. And remember too, Saturdays and Sundays we all pay for as well.
Yeah. And we can learn something from the retail industry, right? I mean, there's consultants for the retail industry that just plan traffic flow in a store, right? To get maximum revenue from that store. So, like, there's a whole science behind it.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, before you open your own first practice or your next location, whatever it may be, like, that's something you can think about is, okay, let me look at it from that perspective and what can I learn? I'm sure there's a chat GPT, right?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people too, like, man, think about if you were to open another location too, like, patients have followed you for years, Same with me. Like, I would actually hire 1 or 2 patients to do a walkthrough, as long as it was safe, right? Do a walkthrough. What should I change before I finalize this print? And the other thing too is, I know it sounds a bit silly, but before you really, sign off with your architect or your designer, just put a bunch of tape around. Because one of my biggest also screw ups is I put a little half wall in before I really saw the depth of getting all the equipment in. Now, what I thought was a huge runway to really do a lot of, higher level functional training didn't exist, right? So really think about what looks good on a blueprint may not work when you actually have flow of patients and therapists and assistants in there, just be really, really mindful that take that extra time.
Love that. So, Clinic Accelerator, I love this, what you've done here, but you've broken out the stages of growth, right, into 5 key phases. Could you walk us through those and what that means at each phase?
Yeah, and hopefully I can get all the phases right, Neil. But we really kind of look at it from a full lifespan perspective now. So, we even now will see a lot of clinicians right out of school, right? So they'll even enter into our programs through just private practice, clinician-based training. That group will usually come right from there, whether they grow into like leadership positions within a practice that we work with, or they're going to come to us right at the very beginning. I want to be a solopreneur and I'm going to open my practice, right? So that kind of becomes our first entry point in real entrepreneurship for a lot of these individuals. From there, we basically get to the point where, growth inside the business beyond me as that solopreneur starts to become a little bit harder because I'm managing people. I need to now do marketing and I don't know how to do marketing. So that becomes a problem for many people. HR and marketing is where we tend to then see them, right? Even though we'll pull them backwards to say, where's your scoreboard? Where's your P&L? So it's kind of that owner that's kind of stuck in the weeds a little bit that we got to help get out. And then we'll see people that are sitting at a point where we kind of reference them as like scale well, right? So they're on pure growth mode. That could be just, how do I get more juice out of the current orange that I have? How do I grow into a bigger footprint? Or I got 1 location, but I want 3. We got groups that are like, I want 3, I want 5. But then we have that group as well that goes from scale well to thinking about exit already, right? So we'll take them through that full lifespan as a brand new clinician, solopreneur, ready to scale all the way to actually exiting from their practice.
I love that. And yeah, from what I remember, it's like you have committed solopreneur, stressed operator, growing operator, millionaire CEO, and then strategic seller, right? And so what are the key things that you've seen about hitting those 7 figures, about becoming that millionaire CEO? What are some of the key things there, like as far as developing clinic directors or lead therapists playing that role?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges, and I think, you and I will probably agree to this too, sometimes we were our biggest stuck point, right? Like I was in the way far too often, right? Or I just fed off of that, that need that I could solve everyone's problems, right? As opposed to thinking about develop your leadership team. Right? People management is so critical, but developing leaders who can do things better than you is not a weakness, right? It's actually, I think, a strength and a talent. And I think what tends to happen is that really to get to that 7-figure is you can't skip meetings, right? You can't forego a mentorship session or a coaching session, right? So you can't not invest in yourself a little bit further. So I think what we see is when they start to get into the point of that clinic director role, yeah, you can do some meetings, but it's not me just telling you, Neil, like, just go do my dirty work. It's like, I need to develop you as a leader of my clinicians. I need to develop, an office manager as the leader of my admin team. And I'm now giving them the tools, resources, and support from my side to actually help them drive the business further. And I think choosing the right people as well that have some skills potentially, but also maybe some people skills too that can get more buy-in, push people a little bit further to grow the business is what is the critical step. But again, everyone needs to understand scoreboards. People have to understand the finances. But that's also part of your role as that 7 practice, leader, that CEO, to make sure that people are aware of what their role is to move those needles. Because if it's just like I'm a glorified babysitter as a CD, you might as well not even have a CD. It doesn't work. That CD has to be a driver of the business.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so do you see practices that will promote someone to a clinic director role, or like that next office manager level, whatever it is, to help them with management? But they promote them based off of that they were just a good clinician?
Yeah, I think sometimes that's one of our biggest mistakes, right? And not always, because sometimes it does work. Like, usually your most talented clinician really could step into that role. But I think sometimes what we expect, and I've been there myself, both in that role, but then also trying to like almost pull myself out of that decision too, is that clinician doesn't maybe understand all aspects of that role. Like, let's be honest, I don't know if I can swear in this one or not, Neil, but you shovel a lot of shit as a clinic director. Like that's literally what you do. But if you can lead your team well and not just be a manager where they actually want to meet with you, they want to learn from you, but you are going to have to do probably some performance reviews. You're going to have some difficult conversations. But if that wasn't really you weren't aware of that, you're not going to want to do that role. So then you take sometimes your best clinician, you put them into a role they don't really want to do or they may not excel at, but it doesn't mean you overlook them though. Like I've learned over the years too, is sometimes that becomes such a good peer-to-peer support that as a CD, my job's just like, hey, Neil, why don't you and Steve go work together? Steve's like a magician and he's got so much confidence in managing neck pain patients. And I can tell by your data, you can't handle a neck pain patient at all. Now, I'm going to tell you that, but I'm going to give you some time with Steve. And I'm going to eat that as a CD to say to the practice owner, I know we're going to lose some productivity this week, but I really think, in 3 months, we're going to see Darryl gain a lot more confidence managing some of these spine cases. So you don't necessarily have to just force your expert clinician into that role. But I think we do a really poor job, because I've done it so many times, is I don't highlight the outcome of that role. Like, what do I really need my CD to do? And work backwards. We kind of create a job description that's kind of fluffy, quite honestly. But what's the outcome? And do I want to do that outcome? And for those that are listening, they're thinking about promoting somebody, test them first. Give them a project that kind of involves a little bit more of the more challenging interactions they may have before they have to overly commit. Because it's really hard too. You've got your rock star. You're like, I kind of have to get you out of that role. That's an awkward conversation.
Yeah. And I think maybe 90% of the time it'll work, right?
Yeah.
If you have good communication about it and like, hey, I'd love to promote you. This is what this role is going to entail, and it's going to entail you getting others to get the work done, right? Yeah. And get the outcomes. And there's going to be times for, like you said, evaluation, coaching. There's going to be some difficult conversations. So like if the person knows it going in, their mental state shifts on it, right? Like they can handle that. It's just when you're like, oh, we're going to promote you. You've done so fantastic with patients, and you're just going to like help all the other therapists do what you do with patients. And they're like, okay, cool. I'm going to be like the best therapist in the practice. And then they get into some of these like, oh, such and such is giving me a hard time today.
Yeah.
And they're like, I hate this part.
Yeah. Or the other one is like, the CD role in my mind is the most difficult one. Same with the office manager. Like, at one point you were your colleagues, but also probably friends with most of the team. And now I'd have to come to you and say, hey, Neil, like, I know you and Darryl go for beers every Friday night, but you either have to turn Darryl around or he's going to go. And guess what? You're going to fire him. How are you going to do that? That's your role, right? And you kind of have to work through some of those scenarios, because at the end of the day, you have a new job to do. Are you willing to do it? Because it sucks when you have that, it's like, okay, team meeting, quarterly rocks. We've tried with Darryl as much as we can, but Neil, he's got to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
the tough choices, right? And so one thing I was curious on as you coached practice owners is this kind of thought around what should I work on first. And so, okay, I need to get new patients in the clinic, or I'm losing patients, or people not completing plan of care. So what should they look at first? Should they spend more on their marketing, or should they try and fix their systems first?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's hard to say like you got to do one versus the other. I still think you need to actually just be running them both simultaneously. Which hose you put on as a priority first, right, may change or turn on just a little bit. Like for me, if I've got a team where I've added a new staff member, I'm cranking my marketing right off the bat, right? Because if I just move leads over to the new clinician, my other team's empty, right? And again, one of the differences, for you, like for Canada versus US, is a lot of your clinicians are salaried. So then you've got individuals, they're not really producing anything, but you're paying them still. Up in Canada, that would be a pushback because a lot of them get paid if they see patients. So now I'm just coming to your clinic full time and I'm not getting any money. But I do think there's so many holes though as you go through, right? So, even when you look at that, I think as those patients are coming through the door through your marketing lead generation, you got to follow that though right from, and this is stuff you can help me here too with, because this is your wheelhouse. But like, what even happens when they call the clinic? Like, I may not even have an opportunity to get them to complete a care plan because my front desk isn't really operating. Like, that's the engine of my clinic, right?
Yeah,
And I've
I would
always,
say that's the most important part of your clinic is actually your front desk.
yeah,
You think it's your clinicians, but it's not, because like
no,
the front desk gets people to arrive and pay.
yeah.
Um,
And people always said to me, like, oh, how are you so good at like managing caseload? And so I'm like, I don't know, my admin was amazing. Like, I just had such a strong relationship with my admin. And I always say this too, is a strong front desk can compensate for a weaker clinician, right? But if you've got a weak front desk, I could be the best clinician. I can't remember everything, right?
that's always from working with thousands of different clinics, right? The thing that I've seen that clinics who do struggle, right, and this is always a frustration of mine, is that they'll be like, hey, my marketing's not working, right? I don't have enough patients. My revenue's not doing well. And you take a look at the numbers, you take a look at the data. They've got a ton of leads coming in there.
Yeah.
But then you start looking through the call logs, the call tracking, and it's like missed call, missed call. They didn't call this person back, and then you can show that to the practice owner, like, oh, I had no idea
Yeah.
that my front desk was really missing a lot of calls or not calling people back, and it may not be their fault. It may just be not trained enough, right, to have a good sales conversation. They may just be overwhelmed because they're handling so many different things, and you need another person just to really handle those inbound calls. And maybe that's a virtual assistant or something like that.
Yeah. And D Bills and I did a little chat not too long ago that we had some of our owners, and we kind of looked at like flow through a clinic and like, what should be the staffing model really at the front. And I just had one of the owners the other day give me some feedback, and she's like, Darryl, I didn't know if I could justify this additional expense, but thank God I did. Because all of a sudden, what you didn't see as potentially lost revenue, all of a sudden they started converting more of these leads. So then their staff got busier, right? So it actually is one of those things that where I would kind of go with this to summarize kind of where do you start is I think everyone still has to kind of pare back. What's the data telling you, right? So if you're looking at scoreboard data or, some sort of, performance data that people will track, and you have to include though right from leads into the same scoreboard as I look at discharges. Right. The thing I would say too, though, is there's certain things that I look at that I could kind of look at from like, I forget what that quadrants called, but like high effort, with positive outcome. But I'm looking for what can I change with the lowest amount of effort that have a positive impact on the clinic. That's where I'm going to go first. The reason I'm a little bit hesitant on the clinical ops side first is I think a lot of it takes longer to execute on. Right. So when I think about trying to get clinicians to think differently, it's like, first I need them to buy into the strategy. Then I've got to get them to behave differently. Right. Then I can start working on the quality improvement to figure out how do I use, like, as an example, treatment planning properly to get someone to really focus on closing a full plan of care out, not just partway through. But that I can't fix that quickly. For what you were suggesting too, is I can fix my leads a little bit faster. Now, do I, as a practice owner, thinking like, oh my God, I've got all these people coming into the clinic, is it going to affect my reputation? A little bit, but probably not as much as if I push too hard, especially in what we were chatting about earlier too, is HR is a nightmare right now. Like there's such a labor shortage for what we all need to run our practices. If I push someone too hard and then they quit, I'm really in trouble. Now as a practitioner, I'm back treating again, right? We can't be afraid to challenge people, but at the same point in time, we have to realize, like everything we said in the beginning of this, no one was taught this stuff well, right? So now it's going to take a little bit longer. So I kind of look at it, make your decisions with data, analyze that data, choose marketing versus systems, but realize your systems are going to probably take a little bit longer for you to kind of see the true fruits of your labor. So think low effort, positive outcome.
Love it. Go for the low hanging fruit, right?
Yeah.
And And so you have a really good pulse on the industry in Canada, in the US. And so where do you see private practice heading in this next 5 years? What should owners be doing now to stay ahead of this curve?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think everything has to consistently evolve around an even better experience every time a patient walks through that door, right? No matter what. And it literally will come with, does your outreach from a lead generation perspective present a different experience than the clinic down the street? Like, if you pick a dot for us right now, Neil, in an urban center, there's probably literally 10 clinics within a 3 kilometer radius. So for me, it's thinking about the experience of that patient, especially if I have to drive value for someone to be willing to pay out of pocket. That's the focus I always have. Then we got to kind of pare back, right? So then it's about, what am I going to do with AI that's either going to improve in efficiency so I can spend more time driving value and outcome, or become even a little bit, let's say, more efficient and effective with my ability to diagnose, map out a plan. Can I use it to coach? So again, the whole thing has to focus on even better care and outcomes. But then I'm also going to sort of really challenge us all to think, but I know there's lots of differences between provinces and states that we all have to think about. But I do believe the clinics that have a much better integration truly of disciplines, so like an interdisciplinary model, not just, oh, we have a bunch of people under the same roof, that's going to be the way that people are going to go. People have less time. They want a one-stop shop. And I see so much, if we think about how negative outcomes come from bad narratives, the communication piece, for people have access now to information anywhere. We have to be prepared for a patient now to throw their MRI through AI to tell me what to do as a physio, right? So we have to be prepared of how we're going to manage those people who are more knowledgeable than they were with Google, right? So again, how do we utilize this next tech era? In my mind, is going to be what's going to change the game, as long as it's focused on even better experiences for patients.
100% agree. 100% agree. Again, we've seen this shift happen. I think it's just going to accelerate further in terms of insurance companies not paying more or even paying less, and obviously inflation keeps chugging along. I did a survey for myself, like what was I making 25 years ago in practice is the same amount as today. I got paid $100 for a patient 25 years ago. In today's dollars, you get paid about $98. But the yesterday's dollars, the 25 years ago, that's actually $190 in today's money. Right? Because my for a physio, it was like $50,000 US, right? Back then, salary, right? Now we're like hundreds. So that's the thing, right? We are patient per patient visit revenue needs to be higher, right? And in order to do that, we have to deliver more. We have to raise the patient experience. We have to raise the bar on what we're delivering. And if your model is to lower the bar because of what insurance is paying you, it's a dwindling spiral, right? You're just going to get lower and lower outcomes. People are going to come less and less, and it's very hard to build a successful practice that's on like, come in for 15 minutes and this is what your insurance just covers, right? No, we have to go beyond that. Your insurance covers this little part here, but we're going to take you beyond that and have this amazing outcome for you. And we have all these types of programs to help you achieve that. I will say, Darryl, that in Canada, again, I think that because of the way that the health system is different, that you've developed the more integrated approach than here in the US. I think you've been ahead of the curve on that. And I've seen, because we work with a lot of Canadian clients, we work with a lot of mutual clients together with Clinic Accelerator. And what's really fascinating there is that those clinics that have that hybrid model, they have all these other disciplines, they have this holistic type of approach. It's so much easier to market. It's so much easier to grow the clinic. There's more and more clinics adapting that style here in the US. It still has a long way to go, but that really is the future.
Yeah, and I would say too, like even for a lot of us too, I think, to be honest, I'm kind of set my ways at times too, right? But if everyone can sort of change the narrative in their mind, right? It's like, I can't do it in this state, right? there could be a few that it's just not possible, right? Let's, call a spade a spade. But the reality is change that narrative, like, how could I do this, right? Because in the past, we never really had to think that way. We didn't have to. Whereas now, though, we're at a point where if I was to literally look at fee guidelines, and if to keep all my therapists and my admin teams on a proper cost of living, increase every year, patients couldn't afford to come to the clinic anymore. I couldn't charge them that much per session 2-3 times a week. It's just not sustainable. So the reality is balancing fee guidelines too with accessibility, but I do have to pay my staff so they can all eat and survive, versus like the days of me still saying, well, when I was started in practice, this is what I got paid. No one gives a shit anymore. It doesn't matter. This is what it's going to cost me to go and buy bananas. It's terrible when you think about it. But what it is, though, is change that narrative. Like, how could I make this happen? And if that, let's say that practice model doesn't work, what's another practice model that could work? And for me, I would love to, I'm just watching you guys very closely blow up, remote therapeutic monitoring. Like, I wish I had that as a fee code. We don't. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, right? Because what else could I do to generate revenue based on quality outcome? Why am I not doing that? Right? So there's just ways to think about strategy differently, as long as, again, it goes back to what we started with. Put the patient first, so it's not selling something it's not required, because then you won't get buy-in from your team. But is there other ways we can increase the lifetime value of a patient? Because we can't make physio out of reach.
100% agree. So Darryl, thank you so much for being on the podcast here today and giving us tremendous insight. What's the best way for our audience to learn more about you, learn more about Clinic Accelerator?
Yeah, no, thanks, Neil. I appreciate you having the invite to me. It's been fun. It's great to see you all the time as well. Best way to get a hold of me, just clinicaccelerator.com. That'll take you to our website. And probably the fastest way, because email these days isn't as quick for me anymore. I must be getting older. But just go right to Instagram at Darryl Yardley. That's the fastest way to get a hold of me.
And we'll put those connections for you there in our podcast links. So don't forget to check out Darryl and his group with Rick Lau and everybody else at Clinic Accelerator. Phenomenal group supporting both Canadian and U.S. clinics and helping them grow. So thank you, audience, here for being on with me and our Practice Marketing Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the Practice Marketing Podcast for future episodes, as well as our YouTube channel, where we put a lot of this up there too. And also at practicepromotions.net, where we have tons of marketing downloads and advice and tips for you there. You can get our Market to Grow free book, also on practicepromotions.net. And this is Neil Trickett from the Practice Marketing Podcast, wishing you much success in your practice.
A free way for you to support our show is by leaving a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It's a chance for you to tell us what you love about the show, and it helps others discover it as well. Just scroll down to ratings and review on your phone and click write a review. Thanks.